I call Jan Logie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are some bills that are more important than others in this House, and this should be one of those bills. And I just want to start by acknowledging that I'm sure and I assume that everyone in this House cares deeply for the children of this country and that we all want to end child abuse and in the meantime ensure the children who are in our shared care are safe and have every opportunity in life. And the Green Party certainly believes that and wants that for our children. And the Green Party supports, albeit with caveats, 3 provisions in this bill. But the 4th point and the government strategy is of such concern to us at this point that we will be opposing this bill at this reading. We know there are the numbers for it to go to Select Committee, and we look forward to engaging with the community on the bill, but believe it's important in our vote to reflect the concerns that have been raised with us. And I hope that through the Select Committee process, our concerns and the concerns of people in the community are abated to the point that we can support the bill. But let me start, Mr. Speaker, with outlining the things that we do support. So we do support extending the provisions of statutory care and protection to young people aged 17, at the very least. We advocated for this along with other parties and many, many people in the community when this House was considering the Vulnerable Children's Bill about 3 years ago now. We heard during that process compelling and, I have to be honest, completely tear-jerking evidence from young people about their experiences of being aged out of care at 16 and becoming homeless and ending up in trouble with the police and having addiction problems that would never have happened if they'd had the support of the state until they no longer needed it. We listened to them then and wanted to make the change, and it was so sad that the government chose not to actually acknowledge their needs at that point. However, 3 years on, here they are with this provision and we will support it. The Green Party also supports calls to have this cover youth justice as well. Very often these are the same young people, so it really is actually a nonsense to have 18 for care and protection and 17 for justice when often they're the same young people. And including care and protection and youth justice is important to ensure that our legislation is consistent with the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. And it would be a really good move, I think, ahead of the UN committee examining New Zealand in September for us to get consistent on this minimal level. The Green Party also supports the establishment of independent advocacy service with a particular focus on children. I understand this idea came from a hui of young people advocates in the philanthropic sector some time ago, and it's wonderful in this instance to see the government actually picking up on the innovation that's happening in our community and putting some legislative support behind that innovation. We do have concerns, as some others have expressed, that while often philanthropic funding is can go into seeding and developing ideas, it's often not the best model of funding for the long-term sustainability and assurance of something that's part of a legislative system. So we will be interrogating that aspect of it in the Select Committee process. And that this will be an advocacy service, and it will be very important to enable us to hear the voices of young people and look at ways we as a society can include these young people more. However, that advocacy service will not have a monitoring role to ensure the safety of young people. And it's really important that we get that those things are distinct, that monitoring safety role still sits with the Office for the Commissioner for Children. And I do want to register again our deep disappointment that the government has failed to increase the funding for the Commissioner for Children to fulfil that monitoring role when he has clearly told the country and this parliament that he is unable to fulfil that duty properly because of a lack of resource. And while there are significant changes, as heralded by this government, coming into force over the next period, that actually increases the risk for those young people. As change happens, people can fall between the cracks. So actually that monitoring role is critical at this very point. And the fact that that government has chosen not to increase their funding to enable them to do that critical role actually sends a message that their priorities are wrong. Their priorities are not with ensuring the safety of our children as the first priority. And that worries me deeply. We also support the embedding of the views of children and young people at an individual and system level. That was clearly an intent of the 1989 legislation. The paramountcy of the child was there in that act. And through cost pressures and political ministerial risk aversion, we lost it in practice. And it's good to see that now that will be built back into the system. I would like to flag here, though, as well, that children exist in families. And actually, we heard from members from the other side that they've listened to service providers and social workers and children. We've not heard once a mention of families. And that the expert advisory group was very clear about telling stories, and every single member in this House will have heard harrowing stories from families who feel as if their children have been taken off them, where they haven't been given support, where it was not in the best interests of their children. And we hear this particularly from Māori, and we see this in terms of the reflected statistics that almost 60% of children in child, youth and family care and protection are Māori. Now that, I think, means that this system should be building in advocacy and support for the voice of parents. And there's some amazing examples from overseas, actually, of that parental involvement coming in and advocacy, sitting alongside the youth involvement, changing the whole system, and the reduction in the need for children to come into care as a result. And that the lessons out of that is actually, if you involve the parents, the children are better off, and we get sustained change. But sadly, we haven't got that yet. And I do also want to raise some points now to get to our primary concern, and what we can't support in this bill is the single point of accountability being held with the CE of MSD and the delegated authorities. Now, the reason to explain this is that the single point of accountability takes accountability away from the social workers where it's held at the moment. There is some confusion, and I do get that there's some tensions we need to work out in this. But the accountability sitting with the social worker means that it's based on their judgment of analysing all the different variables in every family situation. And what we've seen over time with child, youth and family, and nobody, I don't think, denies this, is that political risk aversion has resulted in really negative impacts on the practice of the social workers within child, youth and family. So if we put the single point of accountability to the CE of MSD, who's directly responsible to the minister, there's an absolute danger that we're going to increase that result and have very perverse outcomes. And when we delegate out into the community the responsibilities and have other people participating in the system rather than social workers, that delegation and authority and accountability from the CE will apply to them. When the minister talks about Māori are keen on this, if Māori are picking this up, they will still be under the CE of MSD's delegation. That is not tino rangatiratanga, that is colonisation. That will not represent the needs of Māori in their community and their ability to actually practice in the way that they believe. It will have them under the direction effect of the minister, which is of deep concern to us.
I call what